G'day and welcome to the Campfire Project. Today I'm here first of all with Dave Berman, who is a mental wellness coach. G'day Dave, how are you?
Yeah, hi, Alan. Thanks for including me in the conversation. I'm feeling great today.
Oh, you're welcome and great to have you here. And then we have Nick Bell, who is a senior professional services consultant. How are you, Nick?
Good, I'm great. Thanks very much for the invite. It's great to be here.
It's been a little while since we've had you on the panel, so it's good to have you back. And then we have Rose Davidson, who is a podcast host, producer and trainer, and president of a social enterprise, Healing Through Love. How are you, Rose?
I'm very well, Alan. Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's lovely to meet Dave and Nick.
Excellent. We'll have a pretty good conversation, I think, because we were thinking about the progress is the results that occurs when you stop making trouble for ourselves. Or as Dave has actually put it, getting ahead by getting out of our own way. So what I'd like to do, Dave, is ask you, first of all, what do you mean by that? What does that mean to you, that statement?
Yeah, it means a lot to me. And I've been sort of exploring what it means for 20 years or so. Do you guys want to know the actual origin story of how I came to this quote? Because they're not my words. I didn't make up this quote. So about 20 years ago, I was engaged to be married to my future ex-wife, and we agreed, because we're not married anymore, but we did get married. And when we were engaged, we agreed instead of exchanging rings, we were going to exchange necklaces. So we were looking for something to put on a necklace, and we were in like a head shop, a cheap store full of tchotchkes and stuff, and we saw this this amulet or pendant that had the Chinese symbol for progress on it. And in the package that the pendant was in, it said, progress is the result that occurs when you stop making trouble for yourself. And at some point in maybe like the 2 years prior to that, someone had really pointed out to me self-sabotage in my experience that I just had never really seen before. So it became something that I found very helpful to be more aware of and to notice. And I think, I might not have gotten into that relationship if I hadn't stopped making trouble for myself in some of the ways that, self-sabotage was showing up for me. So when I saw this pendant, it really spoke to me. And so we chose them and we exchanged them. And that was our wedding symbol. And then just going forward, I continue to see in my life and in the lives of others how common self-sabotage is, and how when we notice it, when we recognize it, we can make different choices. And as soon as we remove that, that self-sabotage, the cause of our own troubles, like things just get better, things get easier, progress occurs. Progress is the result that occurs when we stop making trouble for ourselves. So, yeah, what do you make of that?
Yeah. What do you guys feel about that, Rose?
I am guilty of self-sabotage on a regular basis. And but I do recognize the fact that I sometimes just don't get out of my own way. And it can be a challenge sometimes when you think you're doing the right thing and staying in your comfort zone. And then you realize that, stepping outside of that comfort zone is the best option. But it's sometimes a little bit frightening to dip your toe in the water. Like if you're going to, the lake and it's like wintertime and you want to do one of those ice swims and you think, well, should I or shouldn't I? And most times I bowl in, but sometimes I don't do it for the right reasons.
Look, from me, that's it. I've heard of this concept before, and please forgive me for being. I suppose I'd really like to hear a couple of examples from Dave, because it hasn't quite, hit home for me. I'm sort of thinking, okay, well, what does self-sabotage look like, and what would be, your top 3 examples? Not necessarily from yourself, but just from life. What have you observed from people?
Yeah. Well, back in the very beginning, when the idea of self-sabotage was sort of called to my awareness, I think what was happening often was people who I needed to be polite and friendly and kind to and nurture relationships with, there would be something about my kind of humor or the way I may pass judgment on people. There were things that would come out in my communication that would undermine my ability to develop the relationship that really needed to be developed there. And so this was like, messing me up in my career and in romantic relationships. And so that was where I first began to see it. And as I began to just have more awareness of my communication, and what relationship I really wanted there, the communication just naturally evolved. And as I stopped making trouble for myself in that way, relationships got a lot easier for me. They got more rewarding for me. I think maybe that's what made it possible for me to find myself ready, for a relationship that turned into marriage at that time. It might not have happened otherwise. So that was a very early on example. I've seen it in so many other ways, like feeling stuck at times, maybe not wanting to live in the community where I lived and just deciding, well, I can relocate, so stopping the it's commonly called a limiting belief, it's just a thought that I was treating as true that wasn't true, seeing, oh, well, if I don't really want to be here, I don't have to be here. I'll go somewhere that I do want to be, So literally, like, progress, moving across the country, traveling around the world, getting just a few months ago my own place to live after a long series of house shares. Like, that exact example has shown up countless times. It always looks a little bit different, but seeing it there. And then probably the biggest one of all, like, you could connect it back to that one. It's like seeing where at times, is true for me, and I see this for everybody who's human, we kind of miss that what we're feeling is telling us just about our thinking. And we kind of account for, we explain to ourselves, or we blame our feelings on something other than what we're thinking right in that moment. It happens all the time. But as soon as we realize that, right, we stop making trouble for ourselves by attributing our feelings to something that's not their source, progress occurs. So yeah, those are some ways that I see this showing up.
So Nick, does that give you some ideas there? What sort of limiting beliefs and or things that you've got in the way that have held you back?
Well, I don't know, because the concept, and I'm very open to it. Trust me, I'm sure I've got in my own way many times, and I'll be guilty of all of the above. No problem at all. You're not going to get to this stage and age of life where you haven't. I think for me, looking at it from a really practical point of view, is that so I do, obviously I'm an ex-fire officer, critical incident first responder, and have a background in obviously responding to and taking operational command of critical incidents. And so for me, when I used to go to jobs, I'd have to think differently, and there would have to be a different set of software running in my brain to deal with situations, because all situations are ambiguous. It doesn't, no two car accidents or truck rollovers or explosions or suicides or whatever, suicide attempts were the same. Everything is ambiguous. So for me, when I responded to a critical incident that in fact had come to its final conclusion, which was usually a fatality or something, you could trace, and tell me, I'm happy to be wrong here, Dave and Rose, but trace essentially what we would call a causal chain back through many, many years of why this incident occurred. So incidents for me were, and this is my private and professional life, but I'm just using a professional example, so it illustrates somewhat in technicolor and with a sharper focus. For me, it's not an event in time, it's an event over time. So I'll give you an example. I went to a horrific car accident. I'll just give you a really quick one. Horrific car accident, and was high-speed stuff, and 2 fatalities. And in fact, I knew the 2 people in the car. And as I was standing there on the side of the road, and we were essentially in just a cleanup mode, what it was it occurred to me that this accident had contributing factors that went back 10 years. So the 24-year-old young man that was in the vehicle, in fact, had been beset with problems in his childhood that had led in this causal chain all the way to this event where his car was at high speed on a pole late at night. So I think, I mean, I'm happy to be wrong, but that's what I'm sort of hearing insofar as how do we get out of our own way, is to understand that everything in life has a causal chain. And unless we wake up to the elements, the links in the chain as it's happening, unless we do that, we won't get out of our own way. So being smart and understanding those causal chains is really critically important. Otherwise, of course, you end up with car accidents, failed marriages, failed businesses, failed relationships. But anyway, I'm happy to get other people's thoughts.
Well, to me, self-sabotage is that you have an idea in your brain, say, I'm not good at something. And then you continue to believe that, but you don't stop and think, is it true?
Yeah.
Is there some foundation to that belief that, you're not good at something? And, where does that belief come from? Does it come from something that's happened in your past, or is it something that someone's commented on, during your life? And to me, that's what self-sabotage is. It's a belief. You believe something that has no basis and no foundation for truth.
Mm. Yeah, so I see that actually connects to what Nick was saying, because of the things that we allow to flow through as a causal effect. If we have something happens, we make a decision around that, and then we hang on to that decision, which then causes the next thing that we make. And I love the term events over time and not actually in time, because they are a causal effect. Every decision I make today is based on every experience I've had prior to that.
Good point.
Yeah, that's sort of, I mean, that's connecting the dots actually quite nicely there, Alan. It was more about sort of, say, from a practical point of view, that's how I think about it. The trouble with my brain is that everything for me is very black and white, and it's a very structured way of thinking, and it's probably not a good thing either. I think, because sometimes I have, it really challenges me to grasp the more, the more human element, if you like, and it's a great weakness of mine. In fact, I shake my head sometimes. People sort of, I'm too analytical. There you go.
Yeah. Well, so I see that as being more of a case of, you just said, well, that's an error or whatever of yours, or a weakness of yours. That type of thinking in the work that you do is an absolute strength, because I wouldn't want grey shades in that sort of work. I want it black and white.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, people don't want to sort of abstract concepts. And I'm not saying for a second this is a really important thing about understanding weaknesses and getting out of your own way. And I've visited enough psychologists in a group session and debriefs and things to understand that as well. So yeah, look, I mean, for that sort of work you need extremely analytical, and you have no margin for error. So, but please, I'd like to hear other people's thoughts.
I'm not analytical. I'm just logical.
I wanted to say something about black and white here, Nick. And I think this is a different, maybe, representation of the duality of black and white. Years and years ago, maybe only 1 or 2 years into the operation of my coaching practice, it's about 10 years ago, I guess, I noticed this would come up sometimes with clients, and I created an image, the yin yang.
Yep.
Right? That's 2 colors. They are black and white.
Black and white, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right. And it was showing basically, to the extent that you are making trouble for yourself, progress is not occurring, and as you're getting out of your way, progress just naturally occurs. There's a few more elements to it, but basically I was depicting this concept in black and white.
I absolutely makes sense.
Like that. The way as I've continued to explore this idea deeper and deeper, I see the two ideas, the two components of the one idea really as complementary. It's one sort of circular thing. That's just how it's sort of emerged in my awareness.
If you're going to explain something to me, it's got to be in black and white. It's got to be either, one way or another. It can't be shades of grey in the middle. Otherwise, I don't get it. I don't get the grey in the middle. I just think it's all wishy-washy and it makes no sense. So, it's either one way or another. You can't be both unless there's some really highly charged circumstance that, allows it to be grey in the middle. But to me, things have to be black and white. I'm just too logical for that. But, I usually just jump in with both feet and that gets me into trouble a lot.
Well, I can see the black and white, as you said, in that moment. Well, in a emergency situation, in say Nick's case, more information comes in, he would be changing the decisions he's making, but they wouldn't be wishy-washy. They wouldn't have shades of grey. So we have black and white happening, but the black and white is shifting around depending on the information he's got at the time. And some people might see that as being grey, but no, at that particular moment, it's black and it's white. And
you'd have to make critical decisions. To be a first responder, you've got to make those black and white decisions. You wouldn't be able to have any grey around it because grey could cause even more harm.
So I imagine, because I've not done that kind of work, Nick, so I'm going to just imagine, and you can tell me if this would be accurate or not. You have to make quick decisions. If you find yourself overthinking and ruminating in in an emergency situation where your immediate action is going to determine life or death for somebody, that overthinking is getting in your way, getting in your own way. So as you stop making trouble for yourself in that way, and you find your decisions coming, more quickly, more easily, more accurately, right? Learning to trust whatever it is within you that allows you to make those kinds of decisions quickly and consistently and with good outcomes. Progress. That would be progress.
Yeah, actually, it's a pretty solid way of saying it, actually, Dave, and I like Rose's comments as well. It's a funny sort of world, that's right, because you're actually, as I said to you before at the top of the talk there, that you're actually responding to ambiguous situations. So it is nothing but grey, smoke, mirrors, obfuscation, an inability to grasp all the facts. And what we end up doing, and there's a science behind this, of course, but what we end up doing is satisficing. So we make the first best decision based on the information that we have. And it's called satisficing. I didn't come up with that term. I'm not that clever. But, so what happens is with the information, so the idea is, I'll give you in about 30 seconds, I'll give you the situational awareness lesson. What it is that we've got 5 senses and we're absorbing information all the time and we're interpreting that information. And so we receive that information through the 5 senses, but then our brains are working, looking for patterns and looking for, and making sense. Essentially, we're making sense of what we're seeing and what we're hearing under, what I call high consequence, time poor environments. So you're under a massive amount of pressure. So what happens is your brain, you get used to doing this, and this is probably part of hypervigilance, where it takes you a little while to just calm down when you go to jobs and leave an organisation. But what happens is your brain's making sense of it, and what it does is it searches its database for all the information it can get on a 2-car motor vehicle accident with people trapped, screaming and bleeding out. And you're thinking to yourself, I know I've got about 8 minutes on the clock, and you start working backwards. You don't work forwards. And so what you're doing is you're, exactly as you said, you're changing your tactics all the time to meet timelines that you've got running in your brain. So everything is grey, correct, until you know, and you know, you have to change your incident action plan so many times, and that's a metaphor almost for life, isn't it? Every situation is ambiguous, and so that's right. So here I am talking about working in black and white, yet contradicting myself at the same time, happily, because it's actually important in crisis and emergency situations to be wrong and recognise that as a strength, not a weakness, and quickly change your approach. And therein lies the key to it. It's actually really difficult today. I'm making it sound easy. And one day I'll tell you about my worst day in the fire service. We lost 3 people, and I'll tell you everything goes wrong. But that's the philosophy, or the psychology, if you like, behind it. And I'm not a psychologist, eh?
I think you just described the same thing I'm talking about. Like, yeah. I think you basically just gave, in a passionate and detailed personal example, evidence of how this plays out. You know, you said it's important to make mistakes, notice them, and adjust. The mistake is the trouble you're making for yourself. The noticing occurs, and then the adjustment that inevitably follows is progress.
Well, that's right, and I'd like to get Rose's feedback, but just before now that you set the table with that, you know, we used to have hot and cold debriefs. Hot debriefs straight at the job on the side of the road or whatever it was, straight at the conclusion of the incident, and then back at the fire station 3 or 4 days later, where you're able to actually examine it. And it's actually. This sounds a bit crazy to people outside of the first critical incident first responder world, but it's actually important to be wrong. It was actually important to identify weaknesses, because therein that was the environment in which real progress could be made. And that's why what you say, whilst you're using different words, it resonates with me, because you know, in this atmosphere, if you like, of this environment of great truth and honesty, where you say, look, listen, I really effed that up, I messed that up. You know, what do you guys think? This is my decision making, this is what I did, and so on. So that was the opportunity for great growth and so on.
Yeah, well, if we look at it in life, we don't make any movements forward unless we're making mistakes, because if we've got it all right, we're not going anywhere. But we actually improve through our mistakes that we make. And therefore, it's important, as you said, for us to recognise it, and especially when we've got somebody else's lives at stake and that situation could reoccur, we have to definitely be right on ball. And Rose, what were your thoughts?
Well, as a perfectionist, I I don't like making mistakes. So when I do, I have to analyze, you know, why it went. So, you know, take the 3-day summit, for instance. There were obviously some things that I didn't do to better the attendance for that. So I didn't, you know, use the right words or you know, give the speakers the right cues to be using to promote or whatever. So to me, that was a mistake. So I need to go back and relook at that and find out, you know, what actually went wrong, and analyze it to find out that, you know, how I could improve for the next time. So to me, yeah, I don't like things going wrong. I like things to be, like, someone explains something to me, it has to be in black and white. I hate, it's got to be to the point. It's not, I don't like all the frivolous stuff that goes around it. It's got to be, I think that's why I got on so well. I used to work for a federal law enforcement agency some years ago, and I liked it because everything was black and white. Everything was explained. There was no fluffing around, you know, and I like that, because that's the way I'm built. I just don't like fluff. And, you know, if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody, it's got to be, you know, to the point, at the point, and, you know, don't beat around the bush. I hate it. But it gets me in trouble a lot because I don't read the other person. And sometimes they like the fluff and the you know, not to the point, and you know, they like the roundabout way of having things explained to them. And to me, it's a waste of time. I just like to get it over and done with, and, you know, that's just me.
Yeah, well, don't worry, Rose. There's a lot of people out there with similar personality traits to you, and they will just love that. They love to be spoken to that way. And as you say, it is good that we were able to recognise other people's you know, personalities and know how to speak to them. And I think that's where I had to learn to get out of my way, because I would measure somebody on my past experiences and then treat them in that particular way. And that wasn't causing, or wasn't helping with the relationships that I was trying to create. So getting out of my own way in that particular way. And then, as Nick has said, the speed at which he had to work, there was no time for emotions to be involved. They had to make the right decisions. And I realized that when I was making my mistakes, I was really in my emotions. And we are emotional beings. So it's understanding our emotions is so important to be able to get out of our own way.
Yeah, we have to look at things, I guess, you know, from other people's perspectives. And sometimes as humans, we forget to do that. We, you know, because we're quite judgmental creatures. I mean, that's just, you know, innate in us. But we have to stop being judgmental. We have to stop, you know, judging others based on, as you say, our past beliefs or whatever, and take people on face value to begin with, until we can make a more informed judgment based on fact, not on preconceived ideas.
Yeah. I love the terminology there of talking about judgmental and making judgments. They're completely different things. The judgmental based on our emotions and past experiences and everything else, but the judgment based on the information that we're able to read at the time. So with Nick's work, for instance, he would have had to make lots of judgment calls or judgments on situations, but there'd be no the other side of it, no the emotional side of it in there.
Yeah, I absolutely, and I, you know, it's really important to note that I'm not a machine either. I mean, I used to joke with people, you know, if you had a bad day, don't call me, but if you need your tyre changed, I'm the guy you call. It's a sort of metaphor, if you like, for, you know, I mean, you know, it's very black and white for me. But having said that, you know, some of the incidents, I mean, all of the incidents are very human, you know, and I, whilst on the job, you would deal with everything you needed to deal with in a clinical way, and that's probably the best way I can say is reasonably clinical. Afterwards, that would not, I was not immune. As deeply analytical as I am, it did not give me a shield or make me immune from feeling very deeply other people's pain. You know, I mean, someone we love is in pain. We feel that, you know, and so whilst most of the people that I attended to over 33 years, most of them I didn't know, at those very human moments, I would feel their pain in a lot of ways. You know, you can't, I don't know whether, you know, I don't want to be too graphic, but you can't put a child in a body bag and not feel that. That's going to change you fundamentally for the rest of your life. And once you get up to 3 or 4 or 8, you know, you're really starting to, you know, this is a struggle, you know, and that's why I actually really admire people who are really in touch with that human side. I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm the first to say it's probably not my greatest strength, you know. So there you go.
I would say
Probably
the hot
shielded.
debrief.
Sorry, Alan.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd say in the hot debriefs that you did on the side of the road, there'd been a lot of emotions then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Situations.
You've probably shielded yourself away from that too, to stop that internal pain, because it would have to be absolutely excruciatingly painful to see, you know, that to go through that gambit of emotions on the side of the road. And yeah, I think people learn to shield themselves, shield their heart from feeling pain, because yeah, after a few times I think you just don't want to do it anymore. You don't want your heart to break every single day.
Well, I you know, I thought about it. I know it's probably not the topic of today, and I'd like to get Dave's thoughts as well. I mean, you know, not just me, but I had a thought about that, and I was teaching some fairly senior police, fire and emergency guys, paramedics and stuff. I was running these programs, and I said to them, you know, what I ended up doing with the whole thing was just embracing it. You know, we just take the hit and just embrace it and say, you know what, this is the human side. This is the cost of doing this. It's sort of like saying, you know, what's the cost of love? Well, the cost of love is loss. it's pain, it's sorrow. It's, you know, somebody we love dies. I mean, okay, what are we going to do? We're never going to love anybody then. Are we going to? I mean, what's the shield then? And so, is the shield avoidance and denial, or what is it there? So, you know, so for me, I mean, I don't know whether it's making much sense, but for me, I sort of had a look at it, and then I started to think, because I got asked this question, and it was in front of a lot of people, and they said, "Oh, you know, Nick, how do you become desensitized to these things, and how do you deal with it, and things like that?" And I told them, you know, I'm human. I cry my heart out. You know, when I go home, trust me, I cry my heart, and I still feel sick about a lot of things. And there's no worries. But you know what? I started thinking, you know, years ago too. I am deeply privileged. I was a watch commander. I was deeply privileged to be with people in their last moments as well. And sometimes we saved them as a team, you know, it was we, it's always us. And then sometimes we didn't. And you know what? I'm still privileged. I was with them in their last moments, and that is a deeply privileged moment. I mean, do we love to be there when somebody's giving birth, you know, probably not so much in the room, but certainly outside, and, you know, share these beautiful moments. So there is I always used to say, you know, if we can't save this person, I had this young new firefighter crying at a job, and I said, you know, if we can't save them, what we will do, this is what we'll do today. We will give them back, and it might be in a body bag, but we will give them back in the best possible condition we can to their family so that they can say goodbye. How about we do that? What do we salvage that from today? You know, so it's the sort of paradigm, I think, you know, the lens through which you view life. Anyway, that's enough out of me.
I think that's been a very valid conversation to have at that point, because that's showing getting out of your own way in a big way. Perfect example of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
I feel, you know, I've watched animals die, and it's devastating, and I hate it. You know, it breaks my heart, especially if they've been a pet or a pet of one of my children, you know, maybe not a goldfish, but a cat or a dog. And I get brokenhearted, and, you know, I can't shield myself from that pain, because, you know, what is love? It's all those things, and you have to be able to, you know, I just love people. I just love life. And I think, you know, I can't shield my heart from pain, because it's too hard for me.
I see the situation you're in, where in that situation it might be your own pet, it might be somebody close to you, their pet, etc. Whereas in Nick's case, where he's out there, he's trying to save somebody, it's a different situation. So he needs to be able to shield himself from that, so that he can then deliver back to the family in the best condition, as you said, that person is passed. Whereas in the other situation, yeah, I'd be in tears as well, sitting there with an animal or whatever it is. As a surf lifesaver, when it was an emergency, bang, you just think and you do it and you get on with it. It was only afterwards, you know, we were lucky we never had any fatalities, but that if there had been, I would have been boiling like a baby later on.
Found a mother kangaroo on the side of the road, and I checked for the joey, and I cried when the joey didn't make it, because I thought, what a waste of life. You know, and that's just me. It's not just, you know, pets. It's just any living creature that doesn't make it to it living its full potential. It really upsets me, and I don't know how to shield my heart against that. So good on you, Nick, for being able to do that.
No silver bullet, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Dave. You've been quiet there, mate. We need you to.
I'm loving just hearing you guys see your own experiences in the context of this phrase that I introduced. You know, I basically, you talked about a paradigm or a lens that you're looking through. So I suggested we look at examples from our own lives through this lens. You've accepted the invitation for that, and it seems like now you see the same thing that I'm not only seeing and have seen over and over for 20 years, but I mentioned before that I made like a diagram, this yin yang diagram. There's more to it, and I don't think I want to try to describe it, but I will send it to Alan, or I'll post it once this video appears on social media. I'll post it in a comment. I think it will be interesting for you to see that and kind of continue on this exploration of this, and also for the people who listen to this to then be able to take what they've heard from us and also see how it fits within this visual that I created.
Yeah, because that's what I'm always looking for within these panel discussions. It's not just us talking theory, talking experiences, and wherever possible, being able to share something that other people can then go and apply. So thanks, Dave. That'll be good if you can do that for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so further thoughts that you have on that side of it, Dave, talking about your personal experiences?
Yeah. Over time, it has become clearer to me that I can feel the difference between progress and sabotage. I can feel when I'm getting in my own way, even if it's not immediately obvious how I'm doing that. But the feeling has information, right? It's telling me about my thinking in that moment. So what am I thinking that's creating this problem for myself, right? It's always taking me back to that. And likewise, I can feel a sense of progress, and it gives me reinforcement for sometimes a particular thought, or sometimes staying as far from thought as I can, being sort of surrendered to the flow. This is really where this is what I want to notice the most, right? This is the feeling I want to feel most abundantly. And so having developed the ability to discern between the feeling of sabotage, self-sabotage, and progress has been a beautiful implication of this exploration for me over all these years. And I think it informs my work a lot too.
Yeah, definitely. It comes down to, we talk about emotions, but then talking about, we're now talking about the understanding of those emotions, which is part of it. If you're just feeling the emotions, then you're probably going to get in your own way. But if you understand the emotions that you're feeling, because every emotion has a purpose. There's no right or wrong emotion. It's how we deal with that emotion, what we're feeling at the time. Even like fear, there's a gift in fear, because that's what keeps us alive. When you recognize that there's a danger, that intuition call that we get and says, hey, something's not right here. So in that, we can either, when it comes to fear, we can feel the fear and just get caught up in the fear, or we can go try and understand, okay, where's this coming from? What is it that I'm really feeling here? And then turn that into use that as positive information. So understanding is so important in the whole process. So we can say to people, just get out of your own way, but it's a case of, okay, well, that's great advice, but how do you understand getting out of your own way? What's involved in all of that?
Yeah, emotions play a great part, and understanding your emotions and why you've been triggered with a certain emotion at a certain time is a great way to get out of your own way, and understanding what's happening, within your own body, even, what has that emotion triggered physically for you. It could be a headache, or it could be a backache, or whatever, but you need to understand what's triggered the emotion and what it's triggering for you physically and mentally.
I'm so glad that this conversation has now come to the word understanding. This is beautiful to me. And the yin to the yang of understanding is misunderstanding. So really a loving and compassionate way of seeing my own self-sabotage is to regard it as a temporary, innocent misunderstanding. When you see the diagram, you'll see there's a black circle inside the big white area, and there's words in that little black circle. It says fault, blame, guilt, shame. I don't need fault or blame or guilt or shame. I need compassion and love for myself, for the choices that I was making that weren't really in my best interest. I didn't realize it at the time. It was just a misunderstanding. That's how I was getting in my way. And as soon as I saw it that way, my understanding would allow it to just dissolve, disappear, the progress that inevitably occurs. And there's no need for fault, blame, guilt, or shame about what I was doing wrong, about what was causing my problem or getting in my own way. So I love that you guys are talking about understanding being kind of the linchpin.
Yeah. So when you understand, you got the better, things that just fall into place better. The word shame, I think the talk about the word should not be in the dictionary. I can't do this, I can't do that. Shouldn't be in the dictionary at all. I think shame is one of the words that should be taken out, because in that situation where you've made a decision and you've realized it wasn't the best decision, you rated at the time with the best information you had. It's like, as I said with Nick before, with the information he has around him, he makes a decision, then new information comes in and he changes. The decision may shift, or it may be, strengthened, but it all comes down on the information we have at that moment. So every decision, we didn't go out deliberately to make a bad decision, which I don't think anybody does, then there is nothing in our life that we should have shame for. And if we look at it and go, okay, now I understand the information or the situation better, now with this new information, I'll make a new decision. Because while we're using shame as part of it, or blame or anything else, looking at whether we've done the right thing, we are in our own way, in a big way. We're not only in our own way, we've built a bloody wall around us. And so I think, understanding, it's a word that I always talk about. We just need to keep coming back to that. If I can understand another person, first of all, understand their personality, understand how they need to be spoken to, understand the feedback I'm getting from that, if I've got it right or not, knowing if I've put my focus on the other person in that way, I'll always end up with a better relationship. It'll always be improved over what it was before.
Progress.
So it's progress. It's an understanding brings progress. Without understanding, we don't have progress.
Right. Misunderstanding is the opposite of progress. Understanding is progress. Yeah.
But I like the you're going to be glad when I get off here, because I'll put a sort of my critical incident first response overlay, if you like, on the word understanding, and you did right. Understanding for me is about clarity. So if you were to use it in a firefighting context, it would be about clarity. What is it that it is the absence of avoidance and denial, if that makes sense to you. So to have great clarity gives you the right situational awareness as to what I'm seeing, what I'm processing, and I'm making sense of that which is around me, so that I can make the right decision. So understanding for me is around clarity. And then from there, we could extrapolate and say, well, a lack of avoidance and denial, which is when we practice that, and certainly if you practice that on the fireground, you'd be sent on your way pretty damn quickly. We can't practice avoidance and denial. There has to be clarity of task, and everybody has to, so using the firefighter to speak here, we have to focus with laser-like precision on the task ahead for the condensed timeframes in which we work. So if that makes any sense around understanding, then that's what understanding is for me, clarity.
Yeah, so the avoidance and denial there would be making trouble for yourself. Yeah, so the absence of it is progress.
Yes, great analogy. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So this is the thing, is when we use words, we only really get the understanding where the other person's coming from, what the words really mean, because all of us would use particular words and all of us would see a different meaning in those words. So we're always, rushing and everything else to abbreviate things to get our message across faster. But in that, I believe that we just put so much more confusion into it, because some person will be using one word in a particular way that they believe it, understand it. Another person understands it differently. And it's only when we slow down, we have the conversations, and we're then we are getting out of our own way by asking the other person for their feedback on how they see things. So I think getting out of our own way, one of the ways of doing that is having these conversations.
And understanding brings clarity.
Full circle.
Absolutely.
See, when we started off, there were a few comments going, oh, I don't know whether this is what you agree with this or and all the rest of it. What did we do? We came to a total agreement. And that's why, as I say, this is why I love these conversations.
Well, each person has their own point of view. As just we're pointing out, Alan, words that I use may be understood by somebody else in a different way than what I mean them. And this is where miscommunication and misunderstanding happens. It's how people interpret what is being said or written or, whatever. And it's up to us as the communicator to make sure that our communication is understood by the person that you are communicating to. And if there's any misunderstandings, but it is up to the person being communicated to ask for clarity if they've misunderstood.
That's it. I know I've heard, like hear over and over people saying, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them in that proportion. I keep correcting it and saying you got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. And when you are using your mouth, ask questions. And if I want to get information where a person's really at, I'll ask every question I can think of, and then I'm going to ask them one more. And people will say, how can you ask one more question when you ask them all the questions you can think of? Because the last one is a clarification. From what you've been telling me, this is how I understand it. Have I got it right? That's a question. And that's the icing on the cake for that person to know whether you've understood them or what parts of what you didn't understand can they correct. And you're in a conversation. Both of those outcomes are a win. Whereas if you don't clarify, because half the time we're not tuning our transmitter into the other person to receive when we're trying to give them a message. And we wonder why we have a problem there. But then with the receiver, it's got both up to the transmitter and the receiver. Once I've told somebody something, I'll be asking for how they understood it and getting their feedback on that. But if somebody's explaining something to me, I'll ask them questions about it to make sure that I've understood them correctly as well. Because I know they're saying that the research has shown that when somebody starts talking about an issue that they have, and before somebody else jumps in with a solution telling them what they should do, it's 19 seconds. That's the average. That's not much time. It means no questions whatsoever. And the other person probably hasn't finished their sentence yet. And somebody's jumping in to give them advice. Because that comes back to, I think, picking up the other person's energies and everything else, feeling that emotional empathy for them where we feel their pain. We go, no, I don't want to feel that. So we try and jump in and fix it so we don't have to feel their pain. But we're not giving them the time of day to actually express that and for us to recognise it. And because it's all about, we're in our own way there because we don't want to feel the pain. If we shift our focus to the other person and want to understand them, I find that the emotional impact it has on me is reduced dramatically.
Good point.
And the communication exchange works out better. You end up being able to be of service or assistance to that person with much better effect.
And that's it. You see, and this is, when I first got involved in selling, this was what we used to do. This is how we sold. It was build the relationship. And I had all these coaches coming along telling me, no, that's not right. You're supposed to sell to the person. No, I don't sell, but they buy. And they only buy because I've asked all those questions. I put my focus on them, understood them. It's about the relationships that we build. And everyone's complaining, they feel isolated and everything else. Well, there's a way of changing that. That is, getting out of your own way, putting that other stuff aside and go, okay, I want to have a better relationship. What do I need to do it?
I think it's where a lot of relationships break down is lack of communication in the first instance. So, I know some marriages that have broken up because one wanted children and one didn't, but that wasn't communicated in the early days of the relationship. And if that had been communicated, then there would not have been a marriage, there would not have been a divorce, there would not have been, all this heartache in the middle.
There's a causal chain for you right away.
Yeah, and back to, you know, my initial sort of just awareness of even the idea of self-sabotage. I mean, it's hard to believe that there was a time in my life when I was creating so much of it without even having a notion that it was a thing, you know. Nobody had ever said the phrase to me before until they did, and then I started to see it. So and the example that I said at the beginning, it was about relationships, so and communication.
Excellent. Well, this has been really good. I've enjoyed this. So thank you all for coming along and sharing your wisdom. Is there anything you'd like to, a message you'd like to leave for the people who are listening to this? Rose, would you like to start us off if you've got anything there?
Yeah, I think be nicer to each other. Remember to hug your dog and kick the husband. I'm joking.
Yeah, well, I think my first wife had always said the way to a man's heart is not through his stomach, it's through the rib cage.
No, I think just be kinder to each other, and you know, spend that extra time just listening to the conversation that, or the words that people are having, and ask the questions so that there is no miscommunication, and the world will be a much happier place.
Exactly. Nick?
Oh, just, I mean, look, you know, I've probably come across as pretty analytical here today. I've just been reviewing in my brain. So here's my message for people: don't, you know, don't be too analytical. I mean, it's all good and well, but remember the soft side as well. And it's, you know, your greatest strength will always be your greatest weakness as well. So whilst my greatest strength may have been the analytical side of me, it was also a weakness too. But we'll come back for another session some other time about that.
How about you, Dave?
Well, yeah, piggybacking on Nick, I mean, not just be less analytical, like as if just me saying to you, you know, be that way, you could just suddenly be that way. But I would suggest discover the ability to discern the difference in the feeling between the self-sabotage that shows up in your experience and what progress feels like. Have a look at the diagram that will be posted with this. I would love to hear comments about the diagram. I would love to hear stories from people who've listened to this, of, you know, where they can find their own examples of this. You know, progress is the result that occurs when you stop making trouble for yourselves. Let's have more anecdotes about people seeing that. And if this is something that's still really going on for you a lot, if you're having trouble seeing it, reach out to me. This is kind of where my coaching would be really useful for you.
Thank you. And I think the message there as well is, if you want to get there faster, slow down. Take the time out. For sure. You know, validate everything you're doing, ask your questions about that, get clarity, and then you can move forward with progress. It's been brilliant. So Rose, Nick and Dave, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you all.
And for everybody who's been listening to this, we'll see you on the next campfire. Bye for now.